high school biology. I'm very excited for today. We will be dissecting a fish. So a little apology here for the background. I had to do this in my garage today as it is way too windy out and there is no way you guys would hear me over the wind. So to start off, we're just going to double check and make sure that everyone can hear me. So if you could just please go ahead and click either yes or no that you can hear me, that would be fantastic. Awesome. So you guys did the crayfish lab for homework last week, where you dissected them. What I would like to do is, instead of sharing it, because you all did the same lab and you all did a great job writing it up, I would just like you guys to kind of share what you thought either was the most interesting part of dissecting the crayfish, or how you thought it compared to dissecting the earthworm. So do I have any volunteers who would like to go first? All right, Alicia, go right ahead.
I found the crayfish to dissect was much more complicated than the earthworm, but in some ways it was a lot more interesting. But overall, it was hard to kind of label some stuff because it was just hard to tell, the digestive glands from the reproduction glands, just because it's all in there. But for the most part, it was very interesting and it was very informational.
Sorry about that. Great job. Thank you very much. I actually agree with you. I find it much more difficult to dissect the crayfish than the earthworm. There is much more jammed into that little body than in the worm. Sarah, you had your hand up next, so let's go.
I thought it was harder to see which organ was which, but I did think it would be easier to like cut through just because it was a little bigger than the earthworm. Because the earthworm was just so tiny, it was hard to like get a hold of it, and it kept moving. But this was a lot easier to cut, but it was definitely smellier and harder to label. But yeah, I thought it was cool.
All right, fantastic. Okay, if someone popped in late, just for those of you who popped in late, you're telling me either what you found different between the earthworm or the crayfish dissection that you did, or what you found especially exciting about the crayfish. We all went ahead and did the pig, and that is perfectly fine. You can tell us something you found interesting between the pig and the earthworm then. So we need Robert, Gabrielle, and Anthony. Who's going to go next? Anthony, go ahead.
I thought this one was easier than the worm just because you had more animal to deal with. It was a little easier to hold, and it was really cool actually how everything on the inside sort of came right out once you used the scissors to kind of scoop it.
All right, great job. I agree. It definitely is easier when you have a bigger animal, and you will find today when we do the fish, it should be even easier than either of the other two. Gabrielle, you were next. Go ahead.
I dissected the pig and it was pretty cool because like you could see the heart and the lungs and like the liver, and it was easier than the worm because it was bigger.
Fantastic. Now, if one of you does decide to do the pig, or if you decide to do it at some point, the pig is also easier because the organs are much more similar to your organs. So it is easier sort of to just pick those organs out, I find at least. All right, why don't you go ahead and share with us your thoughts? All right, maybe Robert's having some technical difficulties, so you can go ahead and share your thoughts with us in a few minutes. Okay, today we are going to dissect the fish. First, what we're going to do, though, is we're going to talk a little bit about the fish. I am anticipating that you will be quicker at dissecting today for a couple of reasons. The first reason being the fish is much larger, so it will be easier to hold. It just will be easier in general. And the second reason I believe you will be better is you have had 2 practice dissections. So hopefully those 2 practice dissections will allow you to be much quicker today. For that reason, I'm going to give us about an hour to do our dissection, and we are going to spend this first half hour looking at the fish. So what I am going to do, for some reason my PowerPoint did not load correctly. So give me 1 second, and I will be right back. While I am going to reload that PowerPoint, what I would like you guys to do on the whiteboard is come up with some characteristics of fish. And go ahead, I unlocked your whiteboards. Go ahead and just write them up on the whiteboard. All right. You guys have some great characteristics up here. We have gills, we have fins, we have scales. Fish lay eggs as premature offspring. They have fins, pectoral fins, and they need to be in water. Those are all fantastic characteristics. Now, for some reason, my fish PowerPoint is not loading. So what we are going to do instead is I'm going to share my desktop with you so that you can see my fish PowerPoint that way. So give me 1 second. Let me open that up. Okay, so hopefully you can see my fish PowerPoint. Go ahead and just click yes if you can. This is just going to allow us to look at this a little easier. There we go. Okay, so can everyone see that? Alicia cannot. Okay, Alicia, it should be up on your PowerPoint screen. You may have to click on something that says desktop. Oh, there, Alicia's back. Okay, Alicia, it should be up on your PowerPoint screen. Do you see it now? What you're actually seeing is my desktop. Okay, fantastic. Now she can see it. Okay, no problem. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the PowerPoint screen. In order to do this, I'm going to have to be looking at my PowerPoint screen. So if you have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand because then I'll hear it beep in my ear. But I will not be able to see the text chat right now. So we are going to talk about fish. So fish are important because they exist in the water, and water covers about 70% of the earth. Depending what you believe, and we are not going to get into the semantics of this debate, but some people believe that life began in the water. Whether you believe that or not, water is an essential element to all life on land and in the water. Fish dominate the watery environments and are the ancestors of all other members of the subphylum Vertebrata. And there are a couple of different types of fish. Fish all belong along with the chordates to a group called the Crenacea. This name describes the skull that surrounds the brain, organs, eyes, and inner ear. So if you look on the right-hand side here, there is a picture of the skull of a fish. Now, unfortunately, unless you really dissect this fish, you are not going to see the skull of the fish like this. In order for a skull to be this devoid of meat, it normally has to sit out either in a container where maggot or ant-type animals will eat all of the flesh. So we are not going to see that today. It is believed that fish started out in the marine environments, like salt water in one of the oceans, and then adapted to freshwater environments. So here is a breakdown of the subphylum Vertebrata. You have the class Cephalospedomorphi, the class Nagosthostomata, the class Placoderm, the class Chondrichthyes, the subclass Actinopterygii, and the subclass Sarcopterygii. And then you have the tetrapods. Now, placoderms were very small fish, similar to the fish in this picture. They had no teeth, and they were usually only a few inches long. The mouth of these fish was interesting because the lower jaw moved down and the head shield moved up. So they sort of had, if you look, the front half of this fish seems to be made out of large plates of armor or large shields. The back half looks more similar to modern day fish and the scales that we would expect to see on a fish. When we dissect today, you are certainly going to see the scales of your fish. They are probably going to cover your hands. you can only see the title. Well, that sure is interesting. Okay. So what happens now? I just changed the picture. Did the picture change on your end? Go ahead and write it in the text chat. Oh, interesting. Okay. Then I just won't make it full screen, and hopefully we'll be able to see it this way. So on your picture right now, on your screen, you should see the body parts of a fish. Take a minute and just look at them. I'm not going to read them all to you. You guys are all perfectly capable of reading. Just take a minute and look at the different body parts. We are going to see these body parts, or most of these body parts, on the fish we dissect today. And here is a close-up of the different fins on your fish. Last week when we talked about our worm, we talked about the dorsal and the ventral side of the worm. The dorsal being its back and the ventral being its stomach. In this picture you can see the dorsal fins and the ventral fins of the fish are labeled. The dorsal fins are on the back and the ventral fin is on its stomach. On its dorsal fins, you can also see a label for a fin ray. A fin ray is the individual sort of spike on the fin. There are fin rays on all of the fins, not just the dorsal fin. So, locomotion. How do fish move? Well, our worm, we were able to watch move last week when the live worms were on my dissecting tray. We do not have live fish today. I don't have a fish tank, so we can't look at any live fish. But when a fish moves, they move very quickly, and swimming uses less energy than humans running. However, they can achieve the same types of speeds as if they were running. Fish are very streamlined, and they have something called mucoid secretions that lubricate its body. These secretions come out of the fish's body to reduce the friction between the fish and the water. Now the worm had the same thing. Fish move through the water using their fins and a body wall to push against the surrounding water. The muscles are arranged in a sideways W pattern. They extend posteriorly, so they extend from the front to the back, and anteriorly in a zigzag fashion. So instead of being straight up and down, the muscles are more in the shape of a W from the front to the back. This is important for fish because it makes it easier for them to swim. When they contract a muscle in their body, it moves almost along their entire body from front to back and allows them to move quicker and with less effort through the water. So let's take a look at some pictures of fish. Here we have some pictures of different types of teeth in different types of fish. Now take a minute and look. The teeth in the middle here are very sharp, pointed, and spaced out. The fish on the bottom right that the man's hand is in has more like bony plates in his mouth. The fish in the middle, if you've got close up, he's a red and white fish. He has a beak. They're actually teeth, but it looks more like a beak than a typical mouth would be. And on the far left, you can see an alligator gar and his long nose or mouth with all of his teeth on it. One of the things we are going to look at today when we cut open our fish is the digestive system. The digestive system of fish is similar to that of other vertebrates. He has a stomach that stores his meals. He has a small intestine. The small intestine is the primary site for enzyme secretions and food digestions. Some fish have a spiral valve in their intestine, and others have pockets outside of the intestine called pyloric ceca. And both of these parts allow the fish to absorb their minerals and nutrients more effectively. Now take a look at this picture, and here are some of the inner organs of your fish. We're going to start with the top where it says swim bladder. That is the lighter pink side of your fish that takes up the majority of your fish. Above that, you can see his kidney, and his gallbladder is right below the swim bladder. You can see his gills, his heart. I'm going clockwise around the picture. His stomach, his liver, his intestines, and the end of the intestine, it's not labeled here, but would be his anus. Okay, we're going to skip a little here. All right, so here are some pictures. There we go. Most fish, and if we're lucky enough, maybe one of our fish, when we open it up, we'll be able to see some of the reproductive structures. Most fish are egg layers, but some bear live young. An example of a fish that bears live young would be a shark. Live-bearing fish may be what is called ovoviviparous, which means the eggs simply hatch within the female, or viviparous, which means the unborn young are supplied nourishment through the mother's tissues. So let's take a look at some eggs. So these are different types of fish eggs. The cat in the middle has some orange fish eggs in front of him. If you look to the bottom left corner, and actually at most of the pictures, you can see the large eyes of the fish in their eggs. The bottom left image has a good picture of the egg's yolk sac. And that's where they get their nutrition. Some fish simply lay their eggs in masses, like all of the ones on the left-hand side. And other fish, like the one in the middle top, carry their eggs for protection. Some carry them in their mouths. Some carry them in a pouch. And others carry them internally. And so one of the things sometimes people ask, typically not in the high school biology class, but I did get the question last year, and that is, do fish have lungs? Well, the answer is sort of. Fish can have something called pneumatic sacs. Now, they are not lungs like you or I or your dog or your cat has. However, they are a sac or a duct that allows the fish to swallow air and get trapped in its body. The fish can then use this air that's trapped in the pneumatic sacs to breathe. An example of a fish that uses these is the Indian climbing fish. They swallow air, it gets trapped in these pneumatic sacs, and then the gas exchanges across the vascular surfaces. So this Indian climbing fish spends most of its time on land, and it can still, quote-unquote, breathe because of these pneumatic sacs. All right, and that is where we are going to stop for now, and we are going to start dissecting our fish.